den ich so manche Mitternacht an diesem Pult herangebracht.
Hi, I'm Ken King, president of EDUCOM. I'm visiting Dartmouth to talk to John Kemeny, winner of the first annual Lou Robinson Award. This award, which is funded by IBM, with the winner determined by the EDUCOM Board of Trustees, is given annually to the person or institution which has made outstanding contributions to our understanding of how information technology can be used to improve teaching and learning. The award is a memorial to the late Lou Robinson, who was a champion of computer technology's uses in education. Lou was IBM's Director of University Relations and was with the company for 32 years. He began by managing IBM's part in the computer tracking of Vanguard satellites for NASA. He went on to establish IBM scientific centers. Throughout his career, Lou Robinson was as much teacher and spokesman as he was businessman and scientist. He made it his mission to explain the information revolution to the general public.
Where is the computer revolution? I suggest to you the computer revolution is here. It's in the mind. It's a revolution of the way we think. It's a revolution of how we perceive things. What is the ultimate capability of and potential of information processing? How far can it go? I think it's only limited by our imagination. Fundamentally, what we're talking about is human creativity. We're talking about the most challenging, the most satisfying of all human activities, to do new things, to have that eureka experience, to apply our ingenuity in our various walks of lives to new opportunities.
Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire is one of the oldest colleges in the country. It's a school steeped in tradition, not the kind of place where you'd expect an academic revolution to begin. But begin it did, right here in McNutt Hall, one of the nation's first academic computing centers got its start more than 50 years ago. But in the modern era, it was John Kemeny who made Dartmouth a world leader in college computing. With his associate, Thomas Kurtz, Kemeny designed an academic time-sharing system and wrote the language BASIC. Moving up from his chairmanship of the math department to president of the college, Kemeny led the school to the forefront of academic computing, so that now Dartmouth, the smallest of the Ivy League schools, has nearly 7,000 network ports installed throughout the campus, connecting nearly 6,000 computers, so that all the faculty and administrators and more than 90% of the students have personal computers. Dartmouth has become virtually a computer laboratory, a pace setter in academic computing. All of this is in great measure the achievement of the first Lou Robinson Award winner, John Kemeny. It's a pleasure to see you again, John, and I really appreciate your willingness to participate in making this videotape, which we will show at the EDUCOM conference.
I'm delighted to be able to do it.
In your early involvement with computing at Dartmouth, you created the Dartmouth College time-sharing system and BASIC. What was your vision for computing when you did that?
Before I answer that, let me just say that work Tom Kurtz, my colleague Tom Kurtz and I did jointly, and I want to be sure that Tom gets ample credit for what the two of us did together. Our vision was that every student on campus should have access to a computer, and any faculty member should be able to use a computer in the classroom whenever appropriate. It was as simple as that.
Well, it certainly had extraordinary impact. Was there any impact that you hadn't expected or envisioned?
I think the fair statement is that qualitatively I was right on the impact. Quantitatively, I vastly underestimated it. That is, it had impact on many, many more courses than I thought, and the amount of impact was much greater. I mean, and courses being totally changed because of the availability of computers. I also underestimated, of course, how far educational computing would spread all over the world.
You were certainly involved in all of the major phases of evolution of computers over the last 40 years. Are there any interesting experiences, anecdotes?
It was in 1959, 5 years before time sharing, that Dartmouth decided we had to have a computer of our own. And Tom Kurtz and I and our wives got into a station wagon, drove to Boston, and came back with a computer. There were no personal computers then. Computers filled entire rooms. So we bought a baby computer called an LGP30. It was a beautifully designed, a slow drum computer with paper tape input, but beautifully designed. It only had 16 instructions, one of which was stop. It was too small to have any significant impact on campus, but some of our best students just did absolutely incredible things on it. For example, 2 of the students said they wanted to implement Algol on that computer, and if they had come to me, I would have told them they were totally out of their mind. You know, it was an enormous language. But Tom Kurtz is very permissive, and he didn't tell them that they couldn't do it. So they did it. The big impact the LGP30 had at Dartmouth was it convinced Tom Kurtz and me that if you only open computing up to students, they're going to do incredible things.
John Kemeny's achievement in computing began with his work as a mathematician. He was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1926, and he showed an early interest in mathematics. Fleeing Hitler's invasions, Kemeny's family came to the United States. He attended high school in New York City and entered Princeton University. His education was interrupted by World War II when he was drafted into the United States Army. At age 19, he was assigned to work as a mathematician at Los Alamos on the first atomic bomb.
The most important person I got to know at Los Alamos was John von Neumann, the greatest mathematician of that era, who consulted there and probably a dozen other wartime projects. He actually had designed the method of solving partial differential equations on bookkeeping machines. And I suspect that he decided that there must be a better way of computing things. Because I heard the lecture he gave after the war at Los Alamos. In that lecture, he outlined what he thought a modern computer should be. Of course, every modern computer works exactly on the principles von Neumann laid down there. And the von Neumann lecture was very important to me because I remember thinking, will I ever see one of these wonderful beasts?
He did, of course, but first there was graduate school and a research assistantship with Albert Einstein.
It was certainly an unforgettable experience. He was working on unified field theory at the time, which he actually published a year after the year I worked with him. But it was a very exciting period, and he always had a mathematician as assistant because you helped him with mathematical problems. Einstein did not need help in physics.
Kemeny earned his doctorate, then at age 27 joined the math department at Dartmouth. In 1970 he became college president. In addition to his achievements on campus, in 1979 Kemeny was named by President Jimmy Carter to chair the 3 Mile Island Commission. In 1981, he retired from the presidency of Dartmouth to return to teaching. John, you've been both a faculty member and an administrator. What are the important problems and issues with respect to getting computing into the curriculum?
Oh, I would say threefold: hardware, software, and faculty attitudes. Of these, hardware used to be a very difficult problem, but I think that's being solved. After all, that's only a question of money, and equipment is getting so much cheaper all the time that I think that problem is being solved. Software is a problem. There is not enough good educational software. I've written some through TrueBasic. Others have written good educational software. I think there is not enough of it. The third problem is what the faculty does, and that's a very difficult problem. Some faculty members take to it naturally, but that's a minority. A very typical attitude, for example, in mathematics faculty members in the nation is that I've taught this course extremely well for 25 years, and I see no reason at all why I should make a dramatic change in it. I think you recognize some faculty members you know in that description. Some of my best friends fit that description. And therefore, first of all, you have to convince them that what was good enough for 25 years is no longer good enough with the availability of computers. And then underlying their arrogance may be fear. And that's much more difficult to deal with, that they hate to admit it, that they don't know how to use a computer and they're afraid they would be very bad or would make some terrible mistake in handling this frightening gadget right in front of their students. And that takes some training and some help.
What advice would you give to academic computing people with respect to dealing with that problem?
Try to convert a small number of faculty members and then let them be the missionaries. Faculty members are more likely to take advice from colleagues in the same department or a related department than from professionals. The other thing that you can do is convert students, and that they will be the best missionaries. I know that at Dartmouth, where many faculty members gladly started using computers, others held back, and eventually they had to learn in self-defense. As one good friend of mine said, there came the day when the students could do a great deal that they couldn't do, so they had to learn how to use a computer.
Information technology professionals have had a tough time getting the attention of the president and the provost at institutions with respect to the importance of computing in the curriculum and at the institution. As a former president, how do they go about getting the attention of the president?
The answer is that they first captured the attention of the faculty and of the students. They have a harder time going directly to the president or to the provost than would a faculty member, particularly a senior faculty member, and often students have more influence too, so I think they should do it indirectly. If there's enough faculty insistence on having computers conveniently available for students, the president has to listen. I was very easily persuaded on the subject.
A common problem at many institutions is that junior faculty don't get credit toward promotion and tenure for using computer tools in instruction, and consequently they're strongly advised not to do it. How do you deal with that problem?
I think the question that have to be asked of the administrators at the institution, how would you evaluate a faculty member who teaches a completely obsolete course superbly? I would hope they would give low grades. And in certain types of courses, teaching it without computers is teaching a completely obsolete course. And to be able to teach a good course, at least the first 2 times, will take a substantial amount of preparation.
How can you prove that computing improves teaching and learning? How would you answer that?
Look, it removes some of the drudgery from the course. Students who are terrified of doing arithmetic can still do difficult problems because the computer does the arithmetic. You can do much more significant applications. And computers can be used to give much deeper understanding of a subject than you would have without it. In a calculus course, Taylor series is a fairly difficult topic. The thought that you add up a bunch of polynomials, which are terribly nice functions, the sum of them will be very close to some very weird function that you started with, a transcendental function, is very difficult for a student to understand. You know, I followed the mathematics in college, but I had absolutely no feeling deep down about what was going on. On a computer, you can have the original function drawn, then show step by step as you add up the polynomials, you draw the graphs, and you see it getting closer and closer to the original function. I learned things about Taylor series I had not known after 20 years of teaching calculus just by looking at the graphs that appeared on the computer screen.
In discussions with many presidents about computing, they seem to regard computing as a contributor to the current financial problems of colleges and universities rather than the solution.
Yes, I think computing contributes significantly to the cost of education, as does the library. but I have heard very few college presidents argue that we should therefore do away with the library. I put it that way because I think the greatest contribution of my colleague Tom Kurtz was convincing the Dartmouth trustees that the computing center should be looked at exactly as the library. A position I had to defend years later as president, and my standard line would be, would you ever charge a student for taking a book out of the library? And I would add to it, sometimes I'm tempted to pay a student to take a book out of the library, but surely not to charge him to take a book out of the library. But the fundamental issue is that I don't know what it translates today, but when we get started, it cost us $50 per student to have computing available freely to all students, and incidentally it included the faculty's teaching use of computers. The argument is, well, some students use the computer more, they should be charged extra. But some students use the gym more. Okay, do you charge them extra because they use the athletic facilities more? Some students read an awful lot. Should we charge them extra because they're making excessive use of the library? That's a stupid way to run a university.
You had some comments about computing and libraries working more closely together.
Yes.
Would you like to amplify on that?
I believe that research and reference materials, I'm not talking Shakespeare or Agatha Christie, which I would much prefer reading in a book, but research and reference materials should be published only in computer-readable form, should be put on a national regional network, and be available through computers. Any hard copy should be produced only on demand. With that, I somehow see computers and libraries in a sense merging, though they would each have their own mission. Unfortunately, what has happened, all of which has been good, has been a rather piecemeal solution of the library problem, which reminds me somewhat of having to get a new automobile by buying each part in a different store, and then you personally have to put it together, which I would not be good at.
What do you think about the future of distance learning?
I still believe that the best education is when a really interested and exciting faculty member has live interaction with a group of students. But there is a terribly important class of students for whom this is not possible, namely adult education. It's in most cases impractical or practical only on a limited level. And I'd love to see computer-aided instruction take over a major portion of adult education and make it much more widely available.
Your work created a lot of interest in computer literacy. How would you define computer literacy?
I believe that you're not computer literate unless you have written several programs of your own and have tried to debug them. It is just as in driving a car, they do not test you on the intricacies of the internal combustion engine. I don't think understanding the hardware is nearly as important. But without having written programs, you don't understand what computers do. Without having produced plausible-looking programs that produce reasonable-looking answers, which are all incorrect, you don't really understand the dangers of computers. Or, of course, you may go to the other extreme because of lack of programming experience and not trust computers at all.
What impact do you think BASIC has had on computer literacy, and what do you think its future is?
BASIC was my idea, and it came about when we did time sharing. I said to Tom, look, while we do that, surely we can now come up with a much better language than anyone that's available. And Tom's remark, which I've never let him forget, was that yes, I'm sure we could, but here would be our students with a language they couldn't use anywhere outside of Dartmouth College. Since BASIC became the most widely used language internationally, where at least recently I know it was true that more people in the world wrote programs in BASIC than all other computer languages put together, that's something none of us expected. BASIC was designed by teachers to be very easy to learn, and yet by computer scientists to have enough power in it to write the most advanced program. I think we did a nice design job, though it needed a lot of improvements later on, both to combine simplicity for the beginner and power for the advanced user.
You had a great deal to do with infusing computing into the Dartmouth curriculum. What impact do you think computing has had on the Dartmouth curriculum?
An overwhelming impact. Within 10 years of the coming of computers, there were several hundred courses at a not huge university that were using computers regularly. They range from being used for one or two special purposes when appropriate to courses where the entire course was restructured around computers. I can say from my own experience, for example, I taught until a year ago, and I would not have considered teaching a mathematics course without having a computer available in the classroom. It would be as inconceivable to me as not having a blackboard.
Dartmouth was an early example of something that people refer to as a computer-intensive campus. Is there any evidence that this allowed Dartmouth to attract a different kind of student or better kind of student? And is there any evidence that the students you've graduated are different in some important way as a result of their computing experiences at Dartmouth?
Yes, the answer to both parts of your question is yes. Not so much different types of students, but we have significant evidence that it helped us to attract a larger number of the very best students, the kind of students all the prestige institutions compete for. The evidence is that we periodically survey students as to, first of all, we saw the numbers go up, but secondly, we periodically survey our students why they chose Dartmouth over, say, Harvard or Yale. And in a surprising number of cases, Dartmouth's reputation in computing was one of the major factors the students mentioned. So that's our evidence on that. As far as our graduates go, of course, we first of all have a small but distinguished number of graduates who become famous computer professionals, but a much larger number of them who have gotten to use it. In many cases, they have told me anecdotes that it helped them advance in a non-computer intensive business because they were the only professional there who knew how to use a computer. My favorite story is of a young lawyer who became the firm's expert on computers when they first decided they had to have computers. He happened to be one of that 5% of Dartmouth students who never learned how to use a computer. But just the fact that he had gone to Dartmouth, everybody assumed he was a computer expert. And he was smart enough to rush out and take some night courses in computing and became the expert in his law firm. I tell you what I haven't said so far about types of students using computers that I think is important to say. Some people think that computers are for the best students. And obviously some of our best students have adored the computer. But a large number of our relatively weaker students have gotten a great deal out of computing too. When I said that computing takes the drudgery out of teaching mathematics, students who were insecure on arithmetic all of a sudden can do mathematics. Of course, there are many students who think of themselves as being poor in mathematics or somewhere they got lost in arithmetic. That's a famous fallacy. You know there have been world-famous mathematicians who couldn't do arithmetic. And if they can get away with it, why couldn't a college student get away with it? But all of a sudden, I've seen again and again students who had no confidence in their mathematical ability till they were able to use computers, and they became excellent programmers. Incidentally, their mathematical confidence increased considerably because they didn't once more have to try to learn how to do long division.
There are people who refer to the problem of mathematical phobias, and they often indicate that this is a problem that female students have more often than male students. Is this a problem you've observed, and has computing had an impact on resolving that problem?
Yes, I didn't personally observe it, but the department has an excellent course aimed at students with mathematical phobia. And one of the brilliant moves a young faculty member made was to make it a computer-intensive course. And it all of a sudden turned it from a highly unpopular to an extremely popular course. And he and colleagues who help teach that course say that computer is the single best tool to help overcome mathematical phobia.
Do you think the new algebra programs, for example, in mathematics, will change the nature of mathematics instruction in any fundamental way?
Yes. I go back to something I said. I first took a stand on this when I was asked as a surprise at the meeting of grade school teachers way, way back. And that time the question was about little calculators, whether they still should teach long division. And the position I took was that long division is an algorithm absolutely fundamental in mathematics that reappears in many disguises in mathematics again and again, so it must be taught. And secondly, that you can't understand it without working examples. Therefore, every student should be required to do 3 long division problems. And then I'm afraid I said, but 4 would be cruel and unusual punishment. And I guess I see that going on at higher levels now, where students can't really understand some principles of calculus without doing certain problems by hand, but then they should be free to use algebraic manipulators or integrators or whatever as part of the course. After all, if they get a job where they're supposed to solve problems like that, they'll be expected to use computers.
Have you encountered it in your work any situation in which computers were used inappropriately, particularly in instruction?
When in the 60s, so-called teaching machines were being pushed, I'm glad to say they disappeared. They had a specialized meaning then. They tended to be the kind of drill program that I hated. So I tried to think up some way to explain to colleagues why I hated them when I gave talks. And I came up with a dream. There's a famous anecdote about Gauss when he was in grade school, that the teacher, probably to keep him quiet, gave him a piece of paper on which the numbers from 1 to 100 were written down and told Gauss to add up the numbers. Teacher was quite shocked when he barely got back to the front of the class. Gauss had his hand up and said 5,050. So I suppose the teacher probably added up all the numbers. But then, of course, that's not what Gauss did. He noticed that 1 and 100 added to 101, 2 and 99 added to 101. So he had 50 pairs of 101s, which are easy to do. And of course, he did come up with the general formula for an arithmetic series. Now, I had a nightmare one night. Gauss is back in grade school. And the teacher also wants to keep him quiet, except this is a modern grade school and they've got teaching machines. And therefore, Gauss sits down in front of a computer terminal. It says, now Gauss, take 1 and add 2 to it. And when you have that, then add 3 to it. By the time he adds the numbers up to 100, Gauss decides to become a lawyer and thus changes the entire history of mathematics. That's why I'm opposed to drill programs.
Many institutions are following a pattern of attempting to saturate students, faculty, and staff with personal computers connected to a campus network, connected to a national network. What do you think about that model for computer development?
I think it is great if you can achieve it. I think what is essential is that both faculty and students should have easy and convenient access to computers. And then it becomes a financial question as to how far you can go. Obviously, if you can have each faculty member and each student have a computer in their office or dorm room, that's heaven. There are solutions short of that may meet the need.
With any luck, this video is going to be viewed by thousands of people involved with academic computing. Yes. Is there any particular advice you'd like to give them?
Yes. If you have never used computers in the classroom, I know it can be somewhat frightening. But my advice is go ahead and jump in and try it. Try it on a modest scale until you get your confidence. Then try it in another course or try it in the same course on a larger scale. I can guarantee that within 5 years you're going to ask yourself, how did I ever teach that course without a computer?
Looking ahead, what do you see as the important opportunities for computing in instruction in the short term and the long term?
I think in the short term, I have to say is that the potential that we saw 25 years ago at Dartmouth has still not been realized at most institutions. I'm looking forward to the day when no one teaches a math course for which computers are obviously appropriate without using a computer. The sad fact in mathematics and in many other disciplines is the courses that should use computer, the vast majority of them do not today use it. So in the short term, I have to say, realize the potential that has been there for a long time. In the long term, I think there are more dramatic things that can happen. One of them will be students will do not just their homework, but their serious research on the computer through a combination of computing and library research. It was exactly 25 years ago we dedicated the Kiewit Computing Center, and I made predictions of what would happen in 25 years, and I just realized it's up. And I certainly had predicted there would be one or hopefully more national networks which would provide for anyone in their homes all kinds of services, such as looking at the newspaper, doing their banking, their shopping, some education. I did include adult education, et cetera, and be really not very close to a large commercial national network as far as I know.
Well, if you were dedicating a computer facility today and asked to make predictions on what the state of computing will be 25 years from now, care to venture some guesses?
Yes, I predict that the predictions I made 25 years ago will come true. I'll come back and haunt the earth if it's not true in another 25 years.
As a scholar, teacher, public servant, and computer pioneer, John Kemeny's vision and achievements have inspired and instructed countless thousands the world over. His work and its legacy have made him an unsurpassable choice to receive the first annual Lou Robinson Award.
Fundamentally, what we're talking about is human creativity. We're talking about the most challenging, the most satisfying of all human activities, to do new things.
That if you only open computing up to students, they're going to do incredible things.